Today we're turning this into a vertical display instead over the course of 4 months. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before I head back to Jan from the past, I have to say I am very positively surprised by how well this process worked. It was the first time doing something like that with such a large established plant. I usually put my plants on moss pots when they're really small and then let them take advantage of the moss pot throughout their entire life stage. But with my Thai Constellation, I was about 4 years too late. But better late than never. But let's start chronologically and take it back to Jan from 4 months ago when I first started this project. This is also your opportunity to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and click the bell so you get a notification every time I upload a new video. Engaging with my content is by far the best way for you guys to support me. It costs you nothing, but it means the world to me. So thank you in advance, but let's take it back to Jan from the past. This is my Monstera Thai Constellation. I do love this plant, however, it has done absolutely nothing for me recently. I think within the last year and a half it has grown 2 leaves, these 2 over here. Now that's better than nothing, but I can't really see an increase in leaf size. I don't really get many leaves in the first place. It's just a plant that actually takes up a lot of space but isn't actively growing, which I'm not happy about. I like growing plants. I enjoy there being new leaves. I enjoy the plant changing and me having to repot it and extend it and so on. And this plant is currently just doing nothing. So while it still looks good, it's just taking up too much real estate for not enough action, let's put it that way. Now, I've been growing this for I think 4 years by now, so it is definitely a really small grower for me, and I think it might also have something to do with me not realizing the potential. You know how I always say that the conditions set the potential and then the care realizes that potential? I do believe that my conditions are pretty okay for this plant. It's located right in this window over here, which is an east-facing window, so it gets some direct morning sun, more of it in summer, less of it in winter, but in general pretty bright. So from a position perspective it should grow. From a temperature and humidity perspective it should also grow. It's right next to my alboy that is climbing up a moss pole, and the alboy is growing probably like 10 leaves for every 1 leaf the Thai is currently giving me. Now they're technically both deliciosa, so there shouldn't be such a huge difference in the volume of leaves. So I think it has nothing to do with the conditions, but rather me not realizing the potential for this plant. Most likely because I'm not providing it with enough room to expand. If it can't expand, it won't grow more and or larger leaves. And so why am I hovering like this? Let's sit down. And with my deliciosa, my alboy, it's not a problem because most of the root system is within the moss pole. So it's in a tiny pot as well. So my alboy is in a 20 centimeter pot, or I think I gave it 25 now. 25 centimeter pot, but because it has a moss pole, the moss pole is doubling the volume for roots, whereas this one does not have a moss pole, so I'm not doubling the volume of the pot vertically. It's just a pot, and I believe it is pretty root bound, judging based on these roots, and also judging based on even some roots coming out the top over here. I don't know if you can see this. Now I've tried my best to take aerial roots and funnel them back into the pot. But yeah, I just don't think there's enough room left within the pot. So even if I funnel them back in there, I don't think there's much that can happen. So yeah, basically, in a nutshell, if nothing changes, nothing changes. I do love this plant, and I think it actually looks really nice when you let it climb, and it climbs quite slowly with short internodal spacing. So I think it's a great candidate for a shortish moss pole. The reason why I initially had it crawling is because I already have my alboy climbing, and I suppose I wanted to grow them a little differently so that I add a little bit of interest. Now I made the decision to grow it as a crawler like 4 years ago when my collection was very different, 3 houses ago when I had completely different space availabilities. And also when I made that decision, this plant was maybe in this big, you know, so when I initially started growing it as a crawler, I didn't really anticipate that much of a spread. Now the spread is probably not going to be reduced by growing it vertically instead of horizontally, but maybe a little bit, I hope. At least the pole should also give me the ability to manage the petioles a little bit better. So that's basically what we're trying to do. Now, how are we going to do this? I have no idea. That's going to be the challenge because, well, it's hard to put a plant on a moss pole in hindsight because the plant is not used to the moss pole. So I always prefer starting my plants on a moss pole when they're still really small so they can actually naturally just climb up the moss pole, find their way, and the roots can go into the moss pole. I can't put these roots into the moss pole in hindsight. You know what I mean? How am I going to fiddle them through the mesh and then fill them with moss and so on? So the idea is really that new nodes are supposed to grow into the moss pole and expand the root system. The old ones won't really attach to the moss pole, but maybe we can somehow weave it in. I'm not too sure. Honestly, I've never really done this before. Definitely not with a mature plant like that. So I thought I'll take you along because it's going to be something a little different. We're not actually going to do that today just yet. There's something I want to do in preparation. Somebody left a comment the other day and it kind of made sense to describe it that way. Somebody said that this plant is kind of growing backwards, right? If you're looking at the stem like that and the petioles, these leaves are probably supposed to point this way. But because of the window coming from, like it's like this, the window would be here, right? So because the window is here and the light's coming from there, all of the leaves are facing the window. But when I put a moss pole on, of course I put the moss pole in the back over here. So I want these leaves to turn around so that we have a nice display site. So I'm actually going to start with that. I'm going to put the plant back in its window, this window over there. And it used to be in the window like that, right? I'm now going to put it in the window like that, with the window coming from here. So that these petioles or leaves slowly start turning around and face the light. And then these leaves won't be in the way for me to add a moss pole to it, well, whenever that might be. All right, so let's do it. Less talking, more doing, huh? Obviously hard to film against the light, but I suppose you can see what I've done here, yeah? Alrighty, and now we just gotta wait, so I'll see you when there's updates to share. Bye! Welcome back. It has been 3 weeks, and as you can see, the leaves are slowly starting to change position, right? So they used to all pretty much exactly face you. Now they are kind of like this, I don't know, maybe like a 15-20 degree change, let's say. Now, they eventually have to all face this way. So we've got a little bit to go in relation to changing the position of the leaves, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. And can you see this here? New leaf unfurling now. Two options with the new leaf unfurling now. I can either wait for the new leaf to have unfurled and then do a repot and give it a moss pole so that you know, I'm not disturbing the new leaf. However, I would like to make sure that the plant is already facing the light in the way that I want it to face the light going forward, so be in the right position by the time this leaf unfurls, so that can be the first leaf that's looking good, you know what I mean? So I'm thinking we do it now. Also, I'm impatient. Yeah, let's do that. So I have prepared a grow vertical. I kept all 12 squares on the grid at the front. Sometimes I cut the front a little bit shorter. If I cut the front shorter, the back gets deeper and basically holds more volume, which technically would be a good idea for this one, but this one already has such a thick stem. I wanted to give it as much room as possible on this pole to kind of slightly move left and right without ever coming off the pole, right? I mean, ideally it would grow straight up, but we know that plants aren't always working in the way that I want them to work. So I gave it 12. Now, that means that there isn't all too much volume actually in the back. I mean, still plenty, right? But I mean, ultimately it's just one plant, but I know this plant can fill the moss pole with roots very quickly. I spoke to Tim from Grow Vertical, but like Grow Vertical, that's the company that makes them, and it's always linked in the description with a discount code. I spoke to Tim, the founder, owner, the man behind Grow Vertical, and he said he's actually planning on making larger panels of plastic at the back, specifically for plants like Thai Con. So I figured eventually I can always just take the plastic back off and put a larger one on it if I feel like there's not enough volume over here. Now the other decision I need to make is in relation to the pot. It's currently in a 30 centimeter pot, and I suppose we'll find out how root bound it is. But I feel like giving it another 30 centimeter pot might be a little bit small. I might struggle getting all of the roots in there. I don't usually like to go too large with my Thai Cons because then the plant will just focus so much effort on growing roots rather than growing leaves. But the only larger pot that I have than 30 is this 41 centimeter pot. So I think I might have to give it a 41 centimeter pot. But then at least I know that I don't have to repot this for a very long time. It's gonna take forever to climb up the moss pole, so at least then I have a setup that I probably don't have to change for a good 2 years. So I think I'm gonna go with this. But ultimately I need to see what's in the pot first, and let me actually get a bucket so it's not super messy. We're gonna have to improvise today a little bit. As I mentioned, this is... Look how little substrate comes out of there when I tilt it. Just makes me think that it's very root bound. This is nothing I normally do, right? I normally don't convert plants this large to a moss pole. So we'll have to improvise and be creative. Come on. Oh, well, that's looking good. Have a look at all of these roots. Look how chunky this one root is here. Oh well, that's really good news. We'll definitely have to go for the larger pot. Now that's gonna be the challenge, right? Basically this plant will have to fit into the pot like this, which actually works out really well. Have a look at this. This is pretty perfect in there. But I obviously need to make room for the moss pole, so that's going to be a challenge. How am I going to get this on here? I definitely want the moss pole to be at the edge of the pot, over here, not in the middle, for stability purposes. So I think what I have to do is I have to cut off some of the mesh so that the mesh doesn't interfere with all of the existing roots in here. So let me just cut it to maybe here, past here. You know what I mean? Now I have more room for the root ball to go in here. But I'm worried about potential stability issues, hence definitely wanting to put it all the way to the back. To be honest, I think this is probably the best I can do for now. Let me just show you with my phone. So I just put this in here. Now initially I actually wanted to put it on a proper 90-degree angle, but more tilted, like not fully 90 degrees. So I think kind of like this. What is this, 45 degrees maybe? It's going to be good. It just means that the new node is definitely starting to make contact with the substrate, with the pole. I have no desire in putting these existing roots into the pole, right? They're already going into the substrate. Doesn't matter. But this way I'm also interfering the least with the existing roots, and I don't want to interfere with anything. I want this to be as unintrusive as possible so that nothing is going to happen to the new leaf over here. And then even roots like this might actually root into the pole. See these little offshoots here? These little offshoots might actually find their way into the pole then. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. Let's just top it up with aeroid mix and see how we go. Okay, aeroid mix. I'll top it up nice and chunky. I've been using a lot more tree fern fiber in my mixes recently, but this one for the Thai, I have not put that much tree fern fiber in. It doesn't really need the water retention. I think the chunkier the better for the Thai. And yes, I could have disturbed the root system a little bit, or not like freshened it up a little bit, but I know that the mix I previously used was also super chunky, so I'm not worried about the medium getting compressed at all. Oh yeah! So look, you can really see it's now going to start meeting that moss pole. Perfect. All I need to do is I need to make sure it starts climbing up the moss pole fairly straight. Two options, either moss in a moss pole or aeroid mix. I don't know, I honestly can't decide right now. I'm usually pretty decisive. Oh no, too much pressure, don't ask me. Look, I don't have that much moss. I have plenty of aeroid mix. I think I'm going with oh my god, the mess. I think I'm going with aeroid mix. Let's try something new, huh? I mean, I have tried aeroid mix in poles many times, but there are always poles that go outside, so I can just hoist them down, never inside. That's just because I think moss has a much nicer watering experience with the water upside down technique. It doesn't work as well with aeroid mix in the pole because the aeroid mix it has so many pockets that the water kind of just runs through. But I think those air pockets is exactly what this Thai is gonna like. I mean, you saw how much the Thai liked the aeroid mix in the pot. So it will appreciate it in the pole as well. So let me fill that with the aeroid mix. Sometimes what I like to do when I fill the pole with an aeroid mix is I like to make the aeroid mix for the pole more water retentive because it has a larger surface area compared to the pot. And because of the vertical exposure, it will drain quicker. But I'm too lazy to go down there now. Plus, I think out of all the plants, Thai cons really shouldn't be too concerned about drying out a little bit. However, what I really want to do is I want to take the mesh and really push it out a little bit to really make sure that there's plenty of substrate in that pole, because the more substrate, the more room for roots. So I'm going to pack this quite tight. Yes, I want this to be like bulging out like this. Beauty. Wow, that took the entire tub of aeroid mix between the pot and the pot. Wow, I can't believe that. Hopefully that's the only repot for years to come now. I like to leave a little gap at the back over here. That's where I can pour the water in. Hui, honestly, that was so much easier than expected. Definitely a bit messier though. One moment, let me clean up. Hey darling. Okay, let me water everything in. I'm gonna water in the pot first to make sure that that has a bit of weight to it before I start watering the pole, so it doesn't instantly just flop over. Wow, this is gonna take a lot of water. Put in the water a little bit of GT CCS, which is Clonex clone solution, which helps re-establishing roots. Not that it needs to re-establish any roots, but it also helps with shock. This took 5 liters of water already. Hello, darling. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Bradley. That was not on purpose. It's gonna flood this whole thing now. So at least it's thoroughly watered. This is gonna drain. I'm gonna clean inside because it's a mess, and then I'll be back. Bye. Alrighty, here we are. Honestly, I don't think it's looking bad. Like not that bad. But obviously the goal is for all of these to start pointing forward, see if it happens, and if it happens, how long that's gonna take. Now, I also found this ginormous pot. I actually bought this, I bought this for outside but now it's going to work really well. The best thing is this is a perfect fit, and the lip of the pot hovers over here, so any excess water is actually going to drain into the bottom of the pot. I have about this much space between the bottom of the pot and then this beginning of the nursery pot, so I can water quite liberally without having to worry about it sitting in water, which is good because I'm using the aeroid mixture, and I've used moss for so long, I know how much water my moss pots need, so that I water the moss pot without watering the pot much. But with this one, a lot of water is going to drain through before it gets absorbed by the aeroid mix, so good drainage is essential. I wanted to show you how I'm going to ensure this plant is going to stay in the middle. Right now, it looks like it's definitely going to want to lean this way, right? So I take a chopstick and I make use of the moss pole and the grid, and I put the chopstick, let's say, here, and then that chopstick is going to stop the stem from going this way. Now this might have been a little bit too ambitious. I'll just go here. I've done that a few times with plants recently. Definitely a plastic chopstick is better than a wooden one. The wooden one is going to rot eventually, but this is everything I had. I've never done it with a plant that is that big though. We'll see how this goes. I suppose this plant grows so slowly and it climbs so slowly that I'm not concerned about it growing off the pole really quickly. I just want to stay on top of it proactively because it is such a thick stem. It's going to be really hard to manipulate once you let it go too far. Anyway, I'll pop that back in its spot, same spot as before, with the east facing window coming from the front, and we'll see each other soon. And hopefully, as part of this video, we can really observe a good change in leaf direction. We'll find out. I'll see you soon. Oh shit! Holy moly! Oh my god, this is so heavy. Oh, you can't even see it. Excuse the mess to the left and to the right. Today is a big day of filming. Alrighty, so it has been a month. I can't see any rooting activity of the shoot near the moss pole, anything like that. So no updates on the root front, because I also can't tell you what the root system in the pot is doing because I don't have it in a clear... Oh, there's some roots sticking out, no? Yes, okay. A root sticking out is a good sign. There's a little bit of water that accumulated at the bottom of this pot over here. I suppose that's the part that these roots are attracted to, but I'm not in a rush to empty it out or anything like that. It's just fine. It can sit there. The pot in itself is not sitting in the water. Right? If anything, I've actually had great success with that, getting more and more roots to grow out of the pot. Roots seek moisture and oxygen. It's a perfect combination down there, moist but lots of air. Right? Main reason I'm not emptying out is because it's a bit heavy. That can't be asked. But actually that addresses one of my main concerns, because I'm so used to having see-through pots to assess the watering requirements. I'm flying really blind on this at the moment. I know it's getting a lot of morning sun as well, so it's a lot of heat, especially in the morning, so I'm actually watering quite frequently, a little more frequently than I actually kind of anticipated to water it. So I'm kind of constantly worried that I may be over-watering it, but so far so good. I'm definitely desperate for some roots within the moss pole, because the moss pole is see-through, and then I can finally assess the watering requirements and the root health, and then I have this sort of insurance policy in case I overwater the pot. Anyway, gotta stay patient. So yeah, however, I think before the last update, this leaf was about to unfurl. So this is the first leaf that it has grown on this pole, but it was already in development. But that's exactly how I want this leaf to look, right? And this is how I want this leaf to display itself. Like imagine just all of these leaves, just left, right and left, right of this moss pole. Beautiful. Which is then probably a good segue into talking about these other leaves. They annoy me. But look, we knew from the beginning that they're going to be a challenge. I don't know if they're going to turn around any further by themselves. Where are my scissors? Why do I never have what I need? Huh? They already moved quite a bit since the initial video, right? Like they used to all point this way. Now they're definitely slowly making their way this way, but I think I can maybe help a little bit with just some twine. Twine is nice and soft on the petioles, so it shouldn't be causing any sort of harm. But hopefully I can kind of move these in position a little bit more, because right now it's taking up way too much space, right? I gotta be careful, and ideally you do that when the plant is somewhat dehydrated, but YOLO. And then I'm just kind of going back and forth between leaves to move them closer to the middle. And this one is good, it just needs to kind of rotate a bit, huh? Oh, maybe that did it. Not too much at a time. I don't want to push it and potentially snap off all of the petioles. Just a little bit. I think it's already helping a little bit. This leaf is definitely still annoying me. But maybe we incorporate that with the next lot. Let's keep it like this for now. I think it already looks a little bit better, a little bit more compact. To be honest, eventually I think this leaf, for example, is also a bit ugly. I'll cut it off eventually. But I want to see some healthy roots first. I want to see the plant grow and thrive before I start cutting any existing leaves off. For now, they can still contribute to photosynthesis and enable the plant to thrive in the first place. Alrighty, that's the update for now. Realistically, I know that it's gonna be a long journey. Thai Constellation has always been one of the plants that grow quite slowly for me, specifically with maturity. So, you know, we're in it for the long run, but, you know, with plants, there is no such thing as a final result. It's always about the journey. And that's exactly what this video is about. So let's keep staying on that journey then. Beautiful, and here we are. It has been 2 months, so I actually thought I filmed another update in between, but thinking about it, I think this plant is just so big I didn't want to move it. So, well, it has been 2 months, which in the grand scheme of things is not that much time, right? Growing plants is a marathon, not a sprint. But we have seen great things in those 2 months. Most importantly, we have this beautiful new leaf that unfurled. Now, obviously, I'm very, very happy with this amazing variegation that this particular leaf is showing. Now, that in itself is just pure luck. That has nothing to do with it now being a climber rather than a crawler. That is just random, but I think it is just karma, right? Like the plant was like, you're finally giving me what I wanted, let me reward you. So I'll take it as a positive sign, but it's not necessarily a learning, or if you know what I mean, right? I think it's just a positive surprise. But the fact that this leaf even exists, that I believe is definitely a result of me switching up not necessarily switching up the growing method, but just repotting it, giving it a little bit more room for the roots to further expand. And yeah, the more roots, the more water and nutrient absorption, the more leaves the plant can actually grow and sustain. So I do think that this is a direct result of the repot and the plant having more root media available. And of course the root media in itself is split between the pot as well as the pole. Now that's not actually the most exciting news. As much as I'm really excited about leaves, in this particular instance I really wanted to see root growth for a couple of reasons. Well, root growth is actually what shows me that my process was successful, because usually you'll see roots growing first and then there'll be leaves. Secondly, because the pot is black, I am flying blind on the root health of this plant post-repot. Now, it wasn't a very harsh repot, right? I didn't even loosen up the soil and so on. So I wasn't necessarily concerned that there could have been something wrong with the plant as a result of the repot. But in general, whenever you repot a plant, specifically maybe if you go from water propagation into aeroid mix for the first time, I always want to know as soon as possible that my repot was successful, and new root growth is your indication for that. So I can't see whether or not there's new root growth in the pot because it's black. I mean, we saw some poking out, right? And I'm sure there's actually still some poking out. Let me have a look. Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Oh. Well, okay, there's actually way more roots sticking out than I expected. It's so heavy, it's hard for me to show you, but in that cage pot down below, there's actually this much water that has accumulated. I did water this plant yesterday, so it's quite heavy, and I'm not surprised that there's excess water in there. That water creates a very humid environment within the cage pot over there. The roots are attracted to it and start growing into it. Is that my preference? No, I would prefer them to grow in the pot. Am I mad about it? Absolutely not. The more roots, the better. Whether they're in the air, in the pot, or in the pole. Doesn't matter as long as there's roots, right? But that's not really very long story short. I'm super excited. I finally have roots in the pole. That's really why I turned the plant around and wanted to show you. So, and I'll probably have to take you closer via B-roll, but you can very distinctly see actually two chunky roots, and then these chunky roots have started splitting as well. So we are now getting secondary roots on that. So we are very much starting to establish a root system within the pole. And I love that because I have visibility of the root system in the pole, meaning that watering and root health assessment is much easier. And secondly, I always say that a moss pole is a vertical extension of the pot, but it's also an insurance policy. Root rot would be my main concern when it comes to my Monstera Thai Constellation. I'm not worried about pests, I'm not worried about conditions, she's pretty hardy. But root rot would be probably the #1 killer for this plant. I'm trying to avoid root rot where possible. When I grow on the moss pole, I'm never worried about root rot, because even if there would be root rot within the pot, the plant has a vertically stacked root system within the pole. So for the root rot to spread from the pot all throughout the pole, all throughout the 180 centimeters of the pole, for example, is quite unlikely. But for the root rot to spread very quickly within the pot is quite likely. So if I just have a root system within the pot, my main concern is that there's root rot introduced for whatever reason, overwatering, too harsh of a repot, injuring the roots, and so on. And the whole pot just rots away, and then I have a plant that has absolutely no roots. That at this stage is already eliminated, because even if the root system within the pot would now completely rot away, I already have a little root system within the pole, and because I have visibility of that as well, I could quickly take that plant out of the pot before the root rot spreads any further. Of course, ideally I would love to have a lot more roots rather than just 2 down here, but I suppose we are starting the process of establishing a larger and larger insurance policy for this plant. So it's almost like, whew, I can take a deep breath now. The main concern with this plant having root rot, I mean, it can still happen, but I now have an insurance policy. I have a strategy as to what I can do in case that happens without the plant going through all too much shock. I mean, of course, those 2 roots are not going to support the entire plant, but you get what I mean, right? Like, I mean, I hope that principle is clear. And you can see there's more roots growing into it now. So I hope that soon enough we will have even more roots within the pole. And I'm also hoping that that sort of speed in which it grows leaves is going to continue. I mean, we've had the first leaf I can't take credit for, right? Because that was already unfurling shortly after I started this video. But this leaf over here, these 2 have now grown in that 4-month period, which is twice as fast as it grew beforehand, I have to say. Plus it actually grows a bit larger now as well, and nicer and everything. So I think we're very much on track with this plant. Now there's a couple of things that I could do now. I am still not happy with specifically these 2 leaves over here. I think if I would get rid of these 2 leaves, it would be a much more compact plant and take up less space. This leaf over here is very ugly, so I feel like I would love to get rid of it, and I think I actually will as part of today. And then the second thing is I would like to cut the twine to see whether or not the plant is holding itself in place by now, or whether I need to re-twine it. Also not super happy about this leaf. It looks like a little monster. Hello? Had a bite. Is this your work? Yes? Okay. I'm not mad because of the plant. I'm worried about you. These plants are not good for you, my baby. Let me cut the twine and see if anything happens. Okay, that definitely flopped back a little bit more. Not like a crazy amount, but Not necessarily what I wanted, even though this leaf is also quite ugly. You can see that the leaves that are sticking out so much, I'm just banging into things and then they break. But because, that spread out a little bit. But because we are going into winter, I'm a little bit more hesitant in trimming back leaves, right? Because I don't think they'll be replaced as frequently. But I think if I just get rid of this one leaf here, let me see this. We were already reducing the spread quite drastically, and this leaf is not the prettiest anyway. And you know what I mean? It had nice variegation, but look at all of these deformations, all of these rips, all of this, you know. And this one is next to go, I think. Let's cut this off as well. Sometimes cutting leaves might actually encourage the plant to grow new ones. Does happen. Alrighty, I feel a little bit happier about this plant. Definitely excited for this sort of growth pattern. That's just the top 3 over here. Excited for this sort of growth pattern to continue, and excited to see whether or not the high variegation continues as well. That would definitely be like a little treat on the back of the work that I have put in. So please, pretty please. Just to quickly address a few other things from a watering perspective, I would say I water this every 3 weeks approximately. I don't have a schedule and I definitely don't take notes. That's just kind of how I remember watering this plant. Definitely less often than the other plants that are kind of nearby. That is because it is in a huge pot, in a huge pole, so there's a lot of medium in there. A lot of medium can hold a lot of moisture once watered. When I water, I use like 2.5 liters almost for this setup. Obviously a little bit will drain through, but there's just a lot of medium in here. And while the medium is quite well draining, it can still retain moisture, obviously. Plus it's a Thai constellation. They don't mind being on the drier side, right? Like they don't want to be as consistently moist as a Philodendron verrucosum, for example. It has really chunky roots that can very much handle that. So again, my main concern over here was overwatering and introducing root rot. So I was fairly conservative with the watering and only really watered every 3 weeks. I'm also watering the pole in the pot in the same frequency. I mean, when I water the pole, I'm really just watering the bottom part of the pole, which is impossible, so I still water the whole pole, but I mean, I'm aiming for the bottom part to be moist. I don't mind if the top part is dry. There's nothing there anyway, right? So when I water a little bit down the pole just to make sure. And with the clear backing, I mean, I can see the water pouring through just to make sure there's enough water getting into this little bit over here that has the roots. And then I obviously water the pot as well, because that's where majority of the root system is with this plant. You always water the root system. You're not watering the substrate for the sake of the substrate, right? So if I would have a plant on a ginormous pole in a tiny pot, I would mainly water the moss pole because that's where the roots are. And then excess water drips from the moss pole into the tiny pot where there's also a few roots. In this instance, I obviously make sure that the pot is watered first and foremost, but I do also make sure that the pole is watered. So over here, I water them together at the same time. I don't water the pole more frequently than I water the pot or something like that, right? But again, you need to apply judgment and assess how much of the plant is on the pole, how much is in the pot, how big is the pole. Hardly any of my plants are on poles that are that size, for example, right? So when it comes to watering, you're never gonna get around having to actually assess watering needs and then act accordingly. There's no like magic schedule that you can follow and everything will be fine. All I do is like I really stick my finger in that pot and I feel whether or not that substrate is quite moist. Also keep in mind that it had a lot of roots, right? So all of these roots can absorb all of the water. So, you know, I can be a little bit more liberal with the watering than if I would have potted up a small plant with a really small root system. But then hopefully you would also choose a smaller pot. And a smaller pot would then dry out a little bit faster, this large pot doesn't, and so on. I think you got the gist. At the end of the day, I am just being on the conservative side of watering over here. If I'm not too sure whether or not the plant needs water, I'd rather wait another 2 or 3 days than going ahead with it. That is obviously also because we're going into winter, so the plant gets access to less light. There isn't as much sunlight coming through that east-facing window in the morning because there is, you know, less morning. if that makes sense, right? The sun isn't as strong and it's warm, right? When I walk into my dining room in the morning in summer, it's easily like, with that sun beaming through it, it's easily like 28 degrees in that area over there, whereas in winter in the morning it's like 18, right? Those additional 10 degrees in temperature is definitely going to make more water evaporate in summer than in winter. So of course I'm more conservative on the back of that as well. And, well, the plant isn't the largest just yet. Imagine this plant growing another 5 leaves. The medium within the pot and the pole isn't going to change, but there's now an additional 5 huge leaves, hopefully, that the plant needs to look after. With every watering, I provide my GT Foliage Focus as always, and I still put my Tenlin drops in my water as well, just to prevent fungus gnats from coming back. I haven't had any fungus gnats ever since I started using the Tenlin drops, and I want to keep it that way. So I just find it a really easy solution to proactively stay on top of the fungus gnats rather than them potentially coming back and then having to start this whole cycle yet again. If you want to learn more about my fungus gnat treatment, I have a full video on that as well. As I mentioned, I haven't had to do any pest treatment with this plant, but if there's any pests that I'm concerned about with Monsteras, it's usually thrips, and I would use Confidor spray, and that has usually worked quite a treat. But this plant has been pretty low effort, to be honest. As I mentioned, the most I do is water it every 3 weeks, and that's about it. Now, I'm not planning on changing its position at all. I think that east facing window is a good spot for it, and it's also a good spot due to its size. It's hard to maneuver this around, and it's just in a corner over there. Nobody's walking past, nobody cares about it over there. It can do its own thing, but I still get to appreciate its beauty. So we're keeping it in that east facing window, and we'll see how we go over winter. I'll certainly keep you updated about this beautiful plant. But now it's certainly time to wrap it up. In the comments down below, let me know, are you growing a Thai Constellation? And if yes, are you growing it as a crawler? Are you growing it as a climber? Are you planning on changing it? What's your preference? Let me know in the comments down below. Please also make sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell notification. And hopefully I'll see you in my next video.